Finally, we are on action number 2, which is the first action is, again, for new tools to remediate California's abandoned mines. Our series here was, we said, look, you have to figure out what's on the property. And before you do that, you need to know where you are, who owned the property, what happened there. And that's why, yes, last week we talked about bringing in a team so that that was already assembled before you begin to do a complicated project. You don't want to be in the middle of a project and discover something that you really wish you had a geologist or an engineer with you. That was last week. This week, it's the conduct informed assessment. And Dr. Monahan just went into great detail about, and Ellen also Driscoll, thank you so much for those presentations. We've learned a lot about these issues. And why are we doing this? Well, because we think it will improve due diligence on abandoned mine lands prior to land acquisition or project development. If you do it properly, you'll improve market confidence. People will say, oh, well, we've really looked at it. We know it's totally there and we know it's going to cost X to clean it up, but we're still ready to invest because it's a valuable asset to our community. And this is a conversation you can have in public. That increases public and private investment. And that's the only way we can think of to talk people into increasing the pace and scale of abandoned mine remediation. So step 1 is all about due diligence, proper assessment. So how does that translate into public policy, as some of the issues that Ralph raised about having it be on the title, or what does this mean for planning commissioners? So we have a second set of pieces that come with this report, and they're policies. Today I'm going to talk about two areas of policy, enacting new policies to incentivize mine remediation at the local, state, and federal level. And then I'm also going to be talking about making sure that you do abandoned mine assessment as you're doing projects on abandoned mine lands using public dollars. These are the goals of our report. The goals of our policies are to prioritize the protection of public health and landscape health when developing abandoned mine lands. Whether you're putting a trail there, you're treating the forest for health, or you're just trying to, as a private property owner, understand what your opportunities are for development of your property and conservation recreation activities. It's best to understand what it is you're working on. We want the governmental permits to begin to identify, assess, and remediate abandoned mines. We think that one way to do that is to design multi-benefit projects on abandoned mine lands, which might deliver multiple different sorts of benefits, reducing sediment downstream, improving forest health where it is, increasing better habitat for fish. There's many, many benefits, and some of them can be monetized. And that helps increase resources and funding to increase the pace and scale of abandoned mine remediation. A key underlying element which ties to the due diligence is we have to strengthen the requirements for environmental review. A lot of people say, oh, we did an all appropriate inquiry before we did something. Well, that's a paper search. It is not the kind of sampling rigor that we just learned about. I showed this map last week. Why is this important? It's because every single county in the state of California has abandoned mines in it. Some of them are still leaking contamination into the air, water, or soil of California. Many of these are owned by public agencies. Bodie Hills State Historic Park, beautiful little park, was a really good success story from Department of Toxic Substances Control, coordinating with state parks to clean this thing up. But they acquired it without realizing how contaminated it was, and they have a number of mining parks like that. You can understand in 1962 buying these sorts of things, but as recently as 20 years ago, Nevada City acquired a legacy mine feature without really realizing it was a legacy mine feature. Englebright Dam is a legacy mine feature. It was built to hold back hydraulic mining sediment. So the public owns, if you look at this map again, the red dots are the state, or the federal governments. We own a lot of these, the gold dots are the green dots are the state. We own a lot of these mines. So we can begin to talk about taking action without first turning our eyes on privately held lands. It's because we know that usually in capitalism, the more better you get at work, the more you do, the cost comes down. There's a real economy of scale to get your arms around how to assess and address these mines. So the case study that I think really shows how really important this is this is a fun picture. It's the poster child for the report on the front page. This is the Willow Creek Debris Control Dam. It's on the Tahoe Forest. It was built to hold back the sediment from a hydraulic mine. Hydraulic mines upstream from it. It's 60 feet tall. So when you're walking up this creek, suddenly there's this, looks like an Incan Mayan thing. It's 60 feet tall, 280 feet wide, 4 feet thick. That what looks like a lovely waterfall coming around the edge is not a waterfall. That is Willow Creek eroding around the edge of the dam and creating a real integrity problem for that dam, which if it collapsed would flow into, the material would flow into Bullard's Bar Reservoir. And there's also people that live in the creek, below the creek, that could be very seriously hurt or affected by this. There's really no money to address this. The mining companies built it. It was licensed at the time. It's just sitting in the forest. There's a lot of reason to want to clean it up, but how do we incentivize that? How do we get that moving? So one thing we've called for, also the California Legislative Analyst's Office report, which came out last August, and all of this is of course documented in our report, and everything's hyperlinked online to the reports we're referring to. One of these is to inventory the public lands and then incentivize acquisition, but also remediation of public properties. Legacy mines, starting at the top, legacy mines on federal and state lands need to be identified, cataloged, assessed, and prioritized for remediation. You don't want to go out just randomly doing acts of conservation activities when it comes to something like these mines. They're complex, they're large, they cross lots of different boundaries, jurisdictions. So we have to really understand them, and that's part of due diligence. What does it mean when you go assess a property? You use informed assessment. When these abandoned mine lands that are already owned by public agencies are targeted for restoration activities, they need to put in that plan, in that permit, in that funding. We have to demand we need to make the federal and state governments abate their own mine hazards on their own land. And when people do acquire these abandoned mine lands, it might sometimes be acquired because the benefit to the public of acquiring it and cleaning it up outweighs other concerns. So we're not trying to stop acquisition. We're not trying to stop projects on the forest. We're trying to improve and be effective whenever we're working around abandoned mine lands. And that's going to take legislation, and that's going to take political will. The second thing, we're going to narrow down to state government action. We believe that improved informed assessment was required, and it needs to be disclosed. When you're doing assessment methods, what we've learned is that, take mercury, for example, you test the soil, it's at the safe California health screening level. It flows off that property into water, and now it doesn't meet the water quality rules. So the assessment rules need to be more coordinated so that we can look at a landscape and see all of the problems and make sure that people are using technology and methods which actually can find what they're looking for. Public funds that are used to acquire abandoned mine lands should be required to do informed assessment. We've been saying this for 10 years. Acquisitions happen all the time in the state of California, where they are still doing only a comprehensive evaluation phase one under it just is not even close to an informed assessment. And finally, we think that the state should create legislation requiring that the informed assessment that's been discovered using public money should be disclosed and potentially added to the title of the impacted property. So then it can't be sold with the person saying, I don't know, there was some report, we lost it. It didn't seem like it was a big deal, because that's what's been happening in these transactions as we've reviewed them. Every one of these recommendations is spelled out in a great deal more detail in our lengthy report, but I'm trying to not take too much time on this presentation. So the final focus and the most important focus is local government. Local governments must take the lead in remediation on abandoned mine lands in their counties. They even need to be the ones pushing the federal agencies to abate their abandoned mine land hazards, because it's the public that is in their county that's recreating. Here we have a picture of the mercurochrome mine, where you're seeing little kids in dirt bikes whizzing around in mercurochrome mine. We know that that place is covered with asbestos fibers. We know it. We've taken the samples. So that's the people at risk are the citizens of Placer County, the citizens of El Dorado County. And so the county supervisors need to be a powerful voice saying, we need resources. We need to clean up these abandoned mines in our forests, in our meadows, under our schools, in our parks. So we say counties should be required to update general plans in mining impacted regions of the state. They should create maps indicating the presence of mine impacted lands, link these to land use policies and permitting, and include this information and require it to be disclosed as part of the informed assessment to update these maps. The second is the counties have to require specific measures for how we assess, prioritize, and remediate abandoned mine sites in their jurisdiction. I don't think that I've been a county supervisor and I've been a planning commissioner. You're supposed to be leading, not hiding and pretending. We have to be the leaders. Local government has to be the leader that say, this is how we have to assess properties. This is how we have to prioritize cleanup. This is how we have to remediate abandoned mines, even if we don't have jurisdiction over it because it's the forest or it's the BLM. And of course, the funding to do this is going to have to be increased. It's the current funding that these people enjoy here's this, I just found the El Dorado County General Plan land use map. This is it. This is all they have. You can blow it up into some sort of fine detail to find things and try to squint with your eyeballs. But I pulled out one little section of their plan. This is the important mineral resources area. This map is from 2003. It's 20 years old. And it's probably from 1972 or 5. The counties that live on top of these abandoned mines have no resources to address them. So that's where I think we want to start, is how do we bring resources to local government to help solve these problems? And they're going to be the most responsive to private property owners who are also in pain. Our private property owners here in Grass Valley, some of them bought property that happens to be downhill from the Empire Mine State Historic Park. Their soil is contaminated from the arsenic that flows off of the Empire Mine. Their mines are therefore considered to be too contaminated to develop. There's no way those landowners can remediate this problem that keeps coming down from the forest above them. So we really need to get in the trenches and solve these problems as we're permitting activities and as we're moving forward with thinking about how to pay for things.